things. I was very concerned about doing distributed development of a creative new title because you're not in a room. You're not in a, how much is achieved by being in the same geographic space and by having a meeting with people, and you can tell by looking at someone's face going, you're not here with us, what's going on, or you're not speaking up, but you clearly have something to say, what's going on. Well, that's all gone in distributed development. So you would find that, one, things that you might get away with in the physical space, like maybe you said something that offended somebody and you didn't know, but you usually might be able to detect by the end of the day, and you shake it out and you go, hey, I've just noticed something. When distributed development is gone, you don't have any of that. So if you mess up, you're tainting and you don't even know it. If you mess up with people, you're tainting and you don't even know it, right? Because you're not physically together. And in a creative effort, it's really hard to measure along the way how well things are going, right? Because you go, well, we're building all these systems that are interconnected. And it was kind of like in Stranger. Nothing, you could have a game that was shooting, but nothing was really working the way the game was supposed to be until the AI was in all the ammo, right? And so it's like, well, it's working as a shooter, and you're going to have some people go, man, it's too much work the other way. Why don't we just make the shooter? And I was like, because it's the brand. We need this, clever twist on it. But the point is that when you're even when you're in an office and you're hammering out some new creative things, it's challenging enough, right? And then when you go, now it's largely, sometimes you're sharing a video call, sometimes it's just a phone call. That process, I was really intimidated by. I was really intimidated by the idea of doing a new game without everyone being on site, And there's certain things that would be easy. Like it's easier to contract out animation, like certain knowns, and you go, okay, we can provide, more outsourcing type formats and processes that we can get a lot of things in, but the creative process is really hard at that level. And so that was one that I was really intimidated by. Engaging the project and getting into it got a lot more intimidated by. And part of it was that industry and demand for game designers, game engineers blew up in a massive way. So, yourself, us, even though we're tiny, we're tiny, right? I mean, really, like just a small handful of people at the core, and the rest is all contracted. And we try to, make those relationships great. Like you really have to have willpower working in your favor, or you will lose doing that. It will be a bitch. Other countries, different laws, not the same types of agreements. There's all kinds of ways things can go wrong. But what we didn't expect was that we would be competing directly with Facebook for talent. We would be competing directly with Google. We would be competing directly with all the big tech companies that weren't even traditionally in the game business. Like that started really emerging just as this project was launching. If I look at how many people used to work for us throughout the history in the game business and how many of them are still doing what they did, but now they're in companies, they're not even like Facebook. Clearly, yes, it has social games as a platform. It has Oculus as a platform, but you still don't think of it as a game company, right? And then they're bringing all the benefits and packages and employment packages to those employees that small indie developers can no way even compete with, like not a chance. So that was kind of a wow. Didn't expect that the talent pool would be so sought after globally so fast. And a couple of things were happening. The big free-to-plays that were just raking in so much money that they just started putting like production designers and certain artists on retainers. And they're like, look, as long as you send us 10 drawings every 2 weeks, we're thrilled, right? Like these things were happening. And so on one level, I saw a phenomenon where some great artists that I saw were becoming not so great because the meal was coming in so easily, And I'd be like, wow, what happened? And I'm like, what happened to those great paintings that you used to do? Well, what happened was easy money. And the other thing, an extremely expensive place to live. And then this was another revelation. I mean, these seem kind of related, Ted, but I think they're relevant, is what I noticed, and I've raised, venture capital a couple times. We've been out there getting game budgets like yourself, and then just managing ourselves over the last since 2008. And in that process, I've seen that Sorry, I was right on this point before that. My mind is slipping. I just got up a little while ago. Sorry, was up really late dealing with bugs. But Ted, what was I just saying before that?
Well, we're talking about distributed development and the challenges of competing with the larger tech companies who are,
Gotcha.
making, yeah.
Perfect. So back to the outsourcing and stuff, right? So what happened was some entities have gotten so rich so fast that they were able to start contracting to companies that we were contracting to and say, we'll give you 2x per head and we'll take your whole 60-person team, or 70-person team. And so we had some conflicts there. I can't say they were unfair as much as, the industry will shape what you can do, and you try and figure out how to navigate it. But what we were seeing was that we were saying in certain cases, we were going, look, we're just not an operation that can afford to contract lots of bodies. We need to make sure everyone's actually really productive at what they do. So this is how we evaluate it. We just don't go, oh, here's a 70-person team and we're throwing it at for you. We go, not how we work, right? We're more in the trench with it, and we need to make sure that our pennies are adding up to pounds of output. And so when the production started, that was one place on the landscape. And then within like the first 2 years, suddenly that, you had various free-to-plays and mobile companies just exploding financially. And I mean, in a positive way, right? It's just like, wow. Companies I never heard of across the bridge that are now doing, 700 employees, and gaming companies. I never heard of them, mobile companies, things like this. And that started making contracts really difficult because if you had anything that was going over budget or over time, all of a sudden the terms had completely changed in re-signing up because they were getting a lot easier money elsewhere. And so that's another challenge of it, but so that's just sort of the economic changing landscape and how anyone you would be contracting suddenly had a whole nother cornucopia of options out there. And so that was really challenging as a small group. And then creatively really hard, because if you could sit behind someone, like it was challenging for us to get new contracts and design and stuff to really get what an Oddworld game was, and so it's one thing if you're together, it's another thing when you're not. So when you're just giving feedback and you're trying to, it was just so hard. And even with people that were really trying, and some people it's just fabulous, and others at times would struggle. But even when people are really trying, it's a subtle thing. You got two things going. What you said earlier, you're doing something no one's done before, and you're trying to do it, but not in the same room with the same energy, and not with the body language. So how much of it is happening over communication, over this and that? And then for us, what happened then was, so we started with some resources that we lost for, these kinds of reasons. And then we had to then, recover, right? Because you're like deeply in on a project. You're going to cut it or you're going to move on, and you go through those thoughts at times. You're like, we just lost this team. And so then you're like, well, no, we got to fix it. We're too small to fail. like it's like if we were a big publisher, I probably would have said, cut it, and let's move on to the next one. But when you're in deep, it's kind of like you're building your own home. You wish it was coming in on budget, but it's not. But you're in, and you just have to deliver it. And you've probably been through that one too, I'm sure. But yeah, me too. And so it's kind of like that. You get in deep, and then you're trying to find your way out. In the course of that, this sent us around the world in time zones. So the most talented group we could find on engineering was in Australia. And so what happened to us on the home front was we go, well, we got teams working in North America, we got teams working in the UK, and we got teams working in Australia, and then there was Morocco, and then there was Indonesia, and then there was Malaysia, and there was some in the Philippines, right? Like it's moving all over the place, and so there was lots of time zones. But what was happening to us by default, Benny and I, was that the morning calls we would be checking in with the UK. That would typically on our time, typically if it was not under a crisis, 9 a.m. you pick up and you catch up with the UK guys. But now 9 p.m. your Australian team is ramping on. So no matter what, you're in a 12-hour day. No matter what.
Wow.
Right. And now you go, well, how many hours a day, Ted, if you're directing a game, would you spend talking to engineers? Many, right?
And so you are on calls most of those 12 hours or giving feedback on the game and the features. Wow.
And that's when the call starts at 9 p.m.
Yeah.
What do you need?
So you finish at midnight maybe. Or
what do you need? 4 hours of conversation? That's and because of distance and separation, you err on the side of clarity and communication, and sometimes you're trying to be more verbose, but sometimes you try to be more simple and clear, but sometimes you wind up being more verbose because something seems like it's not registering, So for us, for Benny and I, it just became the hardest thing I'd ever gone through in my life. And if I knew that's what I was signing up for, I would have said, no way. And so stamina, you learn a lot about yourself, but I still had like half a head of dark hair at the beginning of this project. I think I still got some dark stuff in the back.
I still see. Yeah. But now,
go ahead.
What a great challenge. And obviously, as we've moved into a world where remote work is much more prevalent, right? And many people who were traditionally not remote working may never go back to working in the office. Mm-hmm. Do you think there is a way around balancing a global workforce, right, for games on a game and maintaining your well-being? Or is there a way to balance both of those things?
I think it's with scale and success.
Okay.
So I think as an indie group, where you're really strapped for resources and leverage and, financial power and clout, because we can't say to certain groups, look, if you do this project, we can hook you up with this one too. Mm-hmm. Or, and publishers do that all the time. Right. So we don't have any incentives beyond we're going to make a game that we think is going to be great and it'll get lots of critical acclaim, hopefully. And, and it'll be global and it'll be good for you. You try and sell all the aspects of why someone should sign on. But at the end of the day, I think if you have I think it's like multinational corporations. If you have good district directors, good directors in this group and that group and that group. So the answer would be great leads. Like really seasoned, great leads that you're completely aligned with. I think it's harder to discover that today because back to demand, right? One of the things that's very common now, you can validate this or not, or challenge it. But what's very common today is if someone's great in this business, they're not available. It's just that simple, right? Because someone else knows it. And if someone goes like, I'm getting tired of this place, one of their friends is going, you should come over here. And if you're really great, right, Ted, it's just not like the headhunter has this guy, he's available. I'm not saying that those people aren't great. I don't imply that at all. So I'm hoping no one misreads this. But what I'm saying is if someone's hot, they're not available. So that really is going to come down to a relationship, in a pre-existing relationship, where maybe they're willing to take a chance in a venture. And I want to touch on this later. Let's come back to that. Venture and cost of living and how those are diametrically opposed, right? Like particularly in California today. But we'll come back to that. We'll just say, venture and cost of living. But so I think it really takes, like I think your group does that better, because you've had how many people does Insomniac have?
We have close to 400 now.
Yeah, right. So you have 4 million people, and you still have the East Coast office, right?
Right. So, well, actually, we have an office in Durham and we have an office in Burbank, but since the pandemic started, we have become even more spread out in that people have been moving to other states and working from home there. And so we've experienced some of what you have, but on a much smaller scale, because we don't have many international folks. We don't rely on teams who are in Australia, for as you said, or in the UK. So we haven't hit that challenge yet. But we do absolutely have the issue with, say, getting everybody together at a time that's relevant. So, that's convenient for them. So we can see each other on the screen and compare notes versus sort of relying on telephone tag or notes that were sent via email and not having that face-to-face or remote face-to-face interaction. So I can totally understand how if you have somebody in Australia that who needs to talk to somebody in the UK and you're the mediator and you're trying to get them to agree on something, like that's almost impossible, right?
That's our life. Yeah. I mean, thank you. And that is concise to it. It's so hard. And I can't take my head off and give enough props to Benny Terry, who just, who I'm telling now, like, don't ride your bike too hard, like recover, man. You got to recover, because this guy was literally, he's like, can you get on the phone at 2 a.m.? And he would say that occasionally to me, and I'd say to myself, I'm like, covered the phone. I'm like, if he could do it, I could do it. I'm like, I'll be there for you, But he was doing it all the time, just relentless. He was like, this is do or die, and we got in. Now we got to get out, and like the hole you dig, right?
Well, and, I mean, what's great, Lorne, is that you've made it work. I mean, you've released a game that's a gorgeous game, and I know, just based on as I said before, what I've seen, it really is true to your original vision for the series and is breaking new ground at the same time.